Hi, my name is Antonio. We are here with the Nocturnal. We are here with Scott Page, entrepreneur slash CEO of ThinkEXP slash saxophonist for Supertramp, Toto, Pink Floyd, an absolute legend.
Ah,
I know my introduction probably can't do any justice for your actual achievements. So would you mind telling our viewers a little bit about yourself?
wow. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the kind words. Legend, I don't know about that, but definitely been in the game a long time. I guess kind of a quick way. I grew up in the music business. My father was a musician. He played on a television show called The Lawrence Welk Show, which was a variety show that was on every week back in the day, early television days. So I grew up around TV and stuff. My father was also a serial entrepreneur. We had boat businesses, lighting businesses, candy businesses. We had 26 donut shops at one time. He's one of the founders, inventors of the wah wah pedal. He also started a studio called Sound City, which was one of the big studios that, Dave Grohl just did a whole documentary about. So I've been around the music space for a long time. I grew up in Los Angeles. Where I'd ended up luckily played in a band called Merciful Soul Band with Jeff Beccaro and David Page, who later became Toto. So I grew up in the music scene, kind of played with a variety of different bands through the years. I got serious about music when I went to college. Before that, I was studying to be an architect, but music really came into life when I started in college. Been very lucky, been playing with quite a few bands, been able to tour the world a whole bunch of times. But, the main thing for me in the last probably 30 years, 25 years, or I guess, 20 something years, is I got into technology and business, did my first CD-ROM in 1990 called Music Bytes. From there, I dove heavily into that, started a company called Seventh Level. Was very fortunate with my partners. We took that company public. So I had a public company. So I went through that. And one of my favorite claims to fame is I co-produced along with a gentleman by the name of Richard Merrick in that company, Seventh Level, the world's first interactive cartoons. So I got really involved in interactive entertainment back in those days. And since then, I've launched a handful of companies. I'm on my fourth startup. Think here, right? Think NFT. So we're in the NFT space, which I saw you. That's how I met you. And, just a kind of a hybrid of a entertainment guy that's played in a lot of bands. And I still play quite a bit with my band ThinkX. I'm just heavily in this NFT space right now. And I love business and I mash business and entertainment together. And that's kind of my story.
Yeah, you honestly did like that concert last week was probably one of the most memorable concerts that I've been to. I've been to a lot of concerts too, but that was
wow.
The fact that it was so, you had the visuals going on, not only like behind you guys, but it was around the entire, we were in a dome. And it felt like that was like the way that the music was almost meant to be played, and I love that. It felt like it was in a music video.
Yeah, well, it is really interesting because I realized a while ago that you can't sell music anymore. There's nowhere place to sell it. Now with NFTs, that starts changing the game a bit. But the fact that you can't, where do you sell music? There's no more downloads. You don't have CDs. It's really the streaming business. And I realized that that's a horrible business model for 98% of the industry, right? All the other people, because in order to make to make $5,000, you got to have 1 million streams. And if you look at Spotify, I think I saw last numbers as like, it's basically 2 to 3% of the entire catalog even hits 1 million streams. So for most, it's not really a very good business model. So I started realizing that what can you sell? And I realized the things that you could sell. You can sell the relationship, right, with the artist and the fan, and an experience.
Right.
So I realized that experience was the key to this. So a while ago, I spent the time really looking at what are the experience. So Think Experience is really about immersive entertainment. And we started really playing these shows. We've done about 50 of the 50 plus shows in that dome through the last 3-4 years. Our COVID just killed us. We were doing those every month for a while because it is a great experience. It's like almost a shared VR experience, because when you sit there and you look up and you hear the music, you're completely surrounded in those 360 visuals. It definitely makes it a really unique experience. And, as you heard, we've been doing a Think Floyd experience with my brothers, Stephen Perkins from Jane's Addiction and Nordfish from Fishbone and
Yeah.
Kenny Olds from Kid Rock's band. And also he took Jimi Hendrix's place when Hendrix died in the Hendrix band and played in the Hendrix Experience for quite a few years. And then also Roberta, who was on Floyd with me and also from Guns N' Roses. So we kind of put this band together to go play this timeless music, and it works beautifully in the domes. It's like it is, like you said, it's made for that music. And it's fascinating. I've had so many people say, oh my God, I've seen all these shows. I've even been to Floyd shows, but this is just an incredible experience. So yeah, we're very thankful for that. And now we're combining these live experiences with NFT minting and kind of creating a whole new kind of an ecosystem for to kind of ways to make dollars and stuff. And NFTs, from my point of view, is probably one of the most exciting things I've seen in a long time. And they truly represent freedom for me in a sense, not just for the artists, but they're basically a new way for artists and fans to connect, their experiences, their engagement, their ultimate fan and loyalty programs, and they're programmable. So it creates a whole new kind of creative experience.
So would you say that you were mentioning how like with the streaming and everything today, that it's not a very profitable way, like if you're making music? So when you were touring, were you making was most of the like income from like ticket sales from touring, or like from selling CDs and records?
Oh, I mean, when the band goes out, if you're selling out stadiums, it's most of the money's coming through the touring and merch. Merch is really good in that sense in those days. And, kind of when we were out, you had to buy CDs. So they were selling CDs because we didn't have any other services. We didn't have the streaming services now. So, it was a combination of those things, but there's no question, you're selling out stadiums. And, on that one of the last tours, we did 199 shows. So it's a pretty big deal. It was the biggest tour in the world at the time, for sure.
Was that with Toto?
No, that was with Pink Floyd.
Pink
Floyd was, massive thing. Toto was, great. I mean, one of the great musical bands. Right. I mean, the musicians in that, Jeff Porcaro, one of the great drummers of all time. Yeah. My hero, actually. He was one that really motivated me to become a musician, to be honest. Like I said, I studied to be an architect and a draftsman, and I was working at a company called Audiodyne at the time, sitting there drawing. And that's when we had to have rulers and pens and stuff. There was no computers, right? So we had to use our hand at that. And then I got in the kid band with those guys, and we were winning all the battle of the bands. And I always tell this story. I'd go to these gigs, and I noticed there was a lot of girls in the front row. So I said, I think this music life is for me. So it completely shifted me into the music business. And then I used my drafting capabilities to become a music copyist, because I was a horrible musician at the time. I wasn't really good enough to go out and really get any gigs. So that's where I took a 24/7 attitude about studying, and took a lot of private lessons, and just practiced and played club gigs like crazy till I could get my skill set up to make a living at being a musician. So and Jeff was always in the back of my mind, because these were my kid buddy friends, and they took off. Jeff went off and started doing the Sonny and Cher show, and then he went with Steely Dan, and they did that, and Boz Scaggs, they did Silk Degree. So they all my buddies were like taking off, and I'm like, I want to be there too. So I studied and practiced like crazy. And, after, quite a few years, I was able to kind of move myself into a musical situation where I was able to make money as that. And then I got to tell you, one of the greatest, most exciting days of my life is when I got called to go play with Toto, because I hadn't played with those guys in so many years. Right. So that was like a big thing for me to basically get my playing together enough that they would call me to actually play with the band. And, obviously working with Jeff and Lukather and Paich and the rest of those guys was just, an extraordinary experience. That definitely scared me to death, though, when I went to rehearsal for the first time. I was so scared to play. And it's actually a funny story, and I've told this bunch, is the first thing that happened. I spent like 3 weeks learning the music, studying it every day. I spent like 8 hours a day, because the last thing I wanted to do was fail. And the first thing I got in there, and I was all nervous the first day, because I didn't want to fall down and be bad in front of all my friends and everything. The first thing, Jeff handed me a cowbell. and made me play cowbell on the first song. And
Really?
that
You
was
even
really the
played?
thing, because time is so important, right? Luckily, my
Yeah.
whole life is about metronomes, and had one of the first drum machines. And so luckily my groove was pretty good. And so I played that first tune, and Jeff put his arm around. He was happy because, he always said a groove is a delicate thing. And time is really, really important. So we hit it off there, and I played from there. And people would actually ask me, what was the best thing about playing with Toto? I said, I got to play cowbell with Jeff Porcaro on 4 songs. And that was truly an experience, because when you start looking at time and the groove as deeply as where it becomes, you realize that it's very complex to make something so simple. And it was just like, sitting there looking in his eyes, playing the backbeat with him, and you can feel the sticks sink into the cowbell together, where it's just like one thing. I try to equate it to people. It was almost better than sex, because it was just an extraordinary space where we kind of connect at the source, and you're just kind of grooving, right? So that was fun. Anyway, that was my Toto experience.
Wow. All right. That was like your little initiation. You had your
It
little,
was my initiation. Yep.
you had to prove yourself that you could keep time. That's cool. That's
I could
actually,
keep up with those guys.
yeah,
I wish I was good as them. I'm telling you, they're monster players. I mean, Lukather and Page and all those guys. I mean, they're just legendary artists, musicians. They played on so many records. And the reason is because they're unique in what they do. Right. And that's really the trip.
yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. What is it, who's your biggest inspiration? Who do you like? What do you admire about them most? But I guess the fact that they're unique and.
Well, that's really the thing. I got, a gentleman by the name of Michael Smotherman, who was, he's passed now. He was one of my mentors, incredible songwriter. If you look him up, you'll see the songs that he wrote. And I got to work with him one summer where we started a thing together where we wrote songs all summer together, and we called it Tune a Day. The goal is we would go into the studio, we'd write the song, record it, finish every tune every day. Right. And I'll never forget, to me, he said, the most important thing is to wear your own clothes. And what he meant by that was, what is your unique value proposition? What makes you different than everybody else? And, the great musicians, for me, they kill you with one note. They don't need to play a lot. You can just sense it, feel it, taste it with one note. It's not about all this noise and stuff, and again, David Gilmour is a perfect example of one of the great players. David changed my life because it was all about melody, right? He made me realize that it's more important to play melodies that people can understand, because he is the master of melody. And I say this all the time, because if you think about listening to Comfortably Numb and imagine hearing that song without the solo in the middle, it's almost like the lyrics were gone, because everybody you hear that melody, right?
Yeah.
And he really changed my playing, because when you're playing, coming up playing saxophone, you try to get into jazz and you play at all these notes and stuff. It's all intellectual and it sounds great, and a few people can follow it, most people don't. But he made me realize that it's all about playing melody. So I completely shifted my playing to really think about trying to play like a singer, more or less, be more melodic and more playing. Part of it was too, as I don't have any chops. I never was a guy that had a lot of, all that kind of facility and stuff. So it actually did my playing real well. And I just tried to play more from a point of being honest with what I play, instead of trying to be fancy and, all that stuff. So it is really about, it ain't what you play, it's what you say. And I always thought that was an incredible statement. And it's kind of how I've lived my musical career.
And that's from the words of David Gilmour.
Actually, it ain't what you play, it's what you say, came from Jeff Porcaro.
Jeff Porcaro. Okay.
Yeah, Jeff said that to me once, and I said, wow, that's very profound. Yeah, right. No, that's a very profound statement.
So I wanted to ask you, so you went from, Pink Floyd is literally like my favorite band of all time. Like I literally have them tattooed on my wrist.
Wow.
Like,
all right.
Yeah. Like Dark Side of the Moon was the album that literally made me fall in love with music. And I really wanted to ask you, how are you, like, can you tell us about how you were approached by I guess David Gilmour or?
Yeah. So I was playing with Supertramp at the time, and we were doing an album.
Okay.
And Dave came on to put a solo on the record. That's how I met him, was through Supertramp. And he came into the studio that day, put a solo on. And so we all hung out and we were, just doing the studio thing. And then I said, oh man, I got a gig right down the street, because I had a band called the Hang Dynasty, which was, all these great players, Jeff Baxter from the Doobie Brothers, and, Mike, just a great band. I said, hey, we're playing just down the street from Rick's house on Ventura Boulevard there, because he lived in what was Woodland Hills area.
Really?
And I said, hey, and so they all came to the gig that night. Gilmour and all the band, the Supertramp guys came and hung out, and we played and all of that stuff. So I became kind of buddies. And then the following week, I was right in the middle of doing a production. My whole thing was I was working on ways of putting sound and picture together. So I developed this thing called visual sound, where we used, back in those days, it was like I had zooming microphones with MIDI based tripod systems that we kind of put together. So the concept was, I always wanted people to understand what it felt like to stand next to like a David Gilmour, what on the stage. Nobody ever gets to feel that, right? And so I put lavalier mics on everybody, and when the cameras would zoom, it would actually bring the volume of that mic up of that space, so that you would actually feel the presence and stuff. So I was doing this big event the next week where I was filming it at Guitar Center, where we took over Guitar Center. I brought a 50-piece band in of everybody from Tower of Power to Toto to Supertramp. And this was just this big all-star thing that I put together to film using this technique. And it was called The First Dance. And Gilmour ended up coming to that day, and he watched this whole thing go down. And then he called me up a day later to say, hey, would you come put a solo on the record, on the Floyd record? And I said, okay, sure, great. So I went to the studio, played, put some solos on the records, and thought, I just did another session. And a couple days later, Dave calls me up and says, hey, we're getting ready to go out again. We're looking for somebody to join the band. Would you be interested in doing it? Now, here's where it gets interesting. To be truthful, I knew nothing about Pink Floyd. I knew nothing at that time about things. I mean, seriously, I was into R&B. I was listening to Stevie Wonder and Junior Walker and all the great saxophone players and that kind of stuff. But I had no idea of Pink Floyd. Actually, the only thing I knew about Pink Floyd at that time, when I think back, was I remember hearing a song called "Have a Cigar." And I remembered that, and I remember the name, obviously, but I never studied it or learned anything about it. And since I was right in the middle of doing that show, I just was producing this. I just filmed it. So now I was going to go put it together and work on that. When he called me up, I said, well, let me think about it, Dave. So I called my friends up and I said, hey, yeah, so I got called to go play on this Pink Floyd record. He said, you got to play on a Pink Floyd record? I said, yeah. They called me up. So I did a session and I went and played on the Pink Floyd record. And then I said, the guitar player, a guy named David Gilmour, called me up. And he said, David Gilmour called you up to come join the band? I said, yeah, come play with the band. They said, dude, you got to do that gig. Yeah. And I said, well, I really don't know much. So I remember going to Tower Record that night about 2:00 in the morning, because it used to be open 24 hours. And I went and bought the records, and I came back and listened to them that night so that I could understand what it was. And then everybody was telling me to do it. So I called back and I said, hey, Dave, yeah, I'll do the gig, right? Smartest move I ever did. I almost didn't do it because I didn't understand. And now I realize that, it's probably one of the most important things I did. It changed my life dramatically. To be associated with that brand and have a piece of that is, it's priceless. And, the experience of touring the world with that band and going around a couple times and, basically sitting there and learning from these guys and, watching it and the production, it clearly changed my life. And I'm very, very thankful for that opportunity. That was one of those extraordinary things for me. Very thankful.
That's to say, I can't believe that David Gilmour is also like my favorite guitarist. Like,
oh yeah, mine too. I mean, he's so musical in the tone. I mean, it used to be funny. I used to love it because I play guitar too. So I played rhythm guitar in the band, and then I played guitars, saxophone solos. And what I loved about the fact with Dave, he never told me what to play, just play whatever you want. It was the easiest job I ever had. I just made up my parts. But I used to, when we play Comfortably Numb, I remember it was so much fun. I used to wander over and stand in front of his guitar amp because I'd play power chords. I'd be doing that. And I'd stand there, and those sound pressure levels of his guitar, hearing that solos, I'd stand in front of there. It was like heaven. It was like heaven. So I used to love that.